Trump signaled a loss of narrative control and power. So that's what I think they're worried about. They're not so much worried about Trump, but they're worried about the precedent that Trump set. The precedent that Trump set is that we can give you Hillary and we can tell you that you must vote for her. And we can tell you that Trump is a Nazi and the next Hitler. And you must obey. And what happened is people did not obey.
Hey friends, before we begin this one, just a quick note from this interview's sponsor, Virtual Shield VPN. On a recent episode of Dr. Phil, a man and his wife shared how their smart devices were hacked and said it changed everything and turned their lives upside down. Hackers were able to access their email from the deep web and then hack into their home video security database where hackers could spy on their every move. Obviously, no family should have to deal with this kind of harassment or invasion of personal privacy. And it makes you realize that one of the best things you can do to protect your personal phone and internet data is to sign up for a free 30-day trial of Virtual Shield VPN mobile and desktop app. It will allow you to create a secure connection to another network over the internet. Virtual Shield can be used to shield your browsing activity, whether on a public Wi-Fi connection, in a foreign country, or at home. Here, let me show you how easy it is to use. First, you go to virtualshield.com or the Google Play Store and download the Virtual Shield free 30-day trial, install it, and click Connect. And now my IP address has been changed to one coming from Chicago, Illinois, and I don't live anywhere near Chicago. Virtual Shield is offering a holiday season special of 30% off all VPN plans, including premium add-ons and Protection Plus. So sign up for a 30-day free trial to Virtual Shield VPN and see what the hype's about. You have nothing to lose. I'll leave the link below this video. Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. I've spoken with this man. Boy, it's almost been, how long has it been, Mike? 6, 7 years?
I think it's been about 6 years. It's pretty wild that it's been that long.
Yeah, it's my fault. I'm sorry. Look, guys, this is Mike Krieger. His website is libertyblitzkrieg.com, and Mike worked on Wall Street for about a decade. And once he woke up, he decided to dedicate himself to truth. So he covers things like imperialism, civil liberties. We'll talk a little bit about impeachment. But the main reason I wanted to get Mike on is because I wanted to ask him about repo, this repo madness. And Mike, you posted a very interesting poll that I saw on Twitter, and this is why I reached out to you the other day. It was from Santiago Capital, and the poll said, do you feel you understand what's going on in the dollar funding repo market? And 83.4% of the respondents said no. Nobody knows kind of what repo's all about and what kind of big black hole it actually is. And now just the other day, there was an article on Zero Hedge that read, repo crisis fades away. For the first time, a turn repo is not oversubscribed. I guess that's good news, but you know, just a few days ago, Zero Hedge was saying the world could end as we know it because of repo. What do you make of this repo madness?
Right. So I wrote a piece this past Monday or Tuesday, actually, I think I published it, called Monetary Looting. And it's gotten more traffic than any piece I've written in months, actually, since the Epstein stuff, because that was very popular. So I suggest everybody read it. I put a lot of thought into this. Repo has been happening since September. I think it was September 17th when it first really got going. And so I've been thinking about it on and off since then. I've read all the repo explainers from people that are experts or really know this segment, right, of the financial industry, this plumbing of the financial industry for short-term funding. And what I came away with was the same response that a lot of people from Santiago Capital, right, Brent Johnson's readers said, and these are mostly financial professionals and financial observers that follow him, right, and they have no idea, right, what's really going on. And so I decided to take a step back and analyze this in a little bit of a different way, rather than try to tell people what I think specifically is the cause of the repo spike back in September and the Fed's panicked actions, which, by the way, include not just taking over a significant chunk of the repo market through its daily and then term operations, but also they started QE again, which they're saying is not QE, but their balance sheet has exploded by about $377 billion in the last few months. And if you look at the stock market, and from when the repo thing started and then the not QE, you see it's gone up in a straight line, parabolic. So this stuff is all related. And I think and that's why I called my post monetary looting. We need to understand it's less important actually to know right now, or to speculate, because nobody that really knows what's going on is talking about what really sparked this to happen. The important thing, I think, is that this is a bailout. This is another bailout. I think what the central banks learned, and the Fed in particular, from the last bailout was, don't let people know that you're doing a bailout. So in other words, make sure the markets don't crater. Make sure there's no public vote, right? If you remember TARP, there was for the 700 billion originally in 2008, they voted in Congress, and originally they voted against it, and the public was like, wait, what? And then they voted again. That's what I think the strategy is now. I think the strategy is, just if you have to bail out the system, just do it right ahead of time. Just do it real fast, and keep it as hidden and quiet as possible, so people are just bewildered by what's going on, and they can't pay attention, and they can't understand it, and all they see is the stock market going up. But make no mistake about it, my opinion in this is absolutely a stealth bailout, and the money is going to the same sorts of people that it went to the first time. And I didn't write about a lot of this stuff for years because I got tired of writing about it. But now that they're doing it again, I think it's important to say they're doing it again.
Yeah, and what you said in our pre-interview, and it wasn't a pre-interview, it was just we were greeting each other, we hadn't spoken in so long, is you made the point that unless you've worked at a repo desk, unless you've been involved in the repo market personally, no one really understands this stuff. And I think that was the power of that poll, is that the Santiago Capital poll, the respondents were mainly people like you and people who are familiar with this stuff. And 84% of the people who are following these markets don't understand repo. And I think what you wrote in your article here is really important. Financial services as currently structured is the most pernicious, predatory, and corrupt industry on earth. It is systematic looting on a massive scale, and the primary patrons of this ongoing and seemingly endless scheme are central banks. And I think what's alarming about what you're saying here is that you're right, at least with TARP, they had to go to Congress, and there was some pretense of lawfulness to the whole thing. But when the central bank is privately run and privately owned and is not answerable to any president or anybody in government at all, they can do whatever the hell they want, and that's what they're doing. So I guess at some point we have to talk about what this means for our economy and the dollar, inflation. What are your main concerns? Because I think people are so complacent about these quote unquote bailouts that they're like, well, it doesn't really affect me. It doesn't really affect me and my job. Everything's fine. Let the banks do what they need to do. Meanwhile, what does it mean to the dollar ultimately? What does it mean to the health of this economy? Do we even know?
Okay, so I think this is representative, and again, I try to make this clear in my post. We have to see this in the context of the last 10 years, but also in the context of what we really are, okay? People still like to pretend we're a democracy or a republic, or that we have self-government, right? In other words, that the people have the ability through the system to create the world or environment or whatever that we want to live in, right? But we live in nothing like that, and we haven't for a while. And the point with this repo thing is, in my opinion, it's just a further tool being used to continue the trend that's been going on since in hyperdrive since 2008, which is oligarchy and feudalism. So in other words, one of the things that people were confused of in the beginning, and me as well, right? Like I did not exactly see that it was going to play out this way, but now we have 10 years of information, and we know. When QE started, a lot of people thought, okay, this is it. Inflation's going to go through the roof, blah, blah, blah. The dollar's going to be worthless. But the reason that didn't happen, the main reason, is because the money didn't actually go to people, okay, to spend it. It went to the sliver of people that don't actually spend money, but they buy assets, the richest people, right? Mm-hmm. If you're printing, let's say you print $1 trillion, and that $1 trillion is ending up in the hands of people that have $50 million or more already, for the most part, they're not going to buy more kielbasas. They're not going to buy more sauerkraut. They're going to go and buy $238 million penthouses in New York City, like Ken Griffin did, the head of Citadel. Okay, that's what they're going to do. So they're going to buy stocks. They're going to buy bonds. They're going to buy financial assets and property. That's what rich people do with their money. And so that's where you've seen the inflation in the last 10 years. I mean, clearly that's been the effect. And I think that's what a lot of people missed. It's that to get the widespread inflation, you people need to actually have access to the money, people that spend money in the economy. And that did not happen. Okay. People that have been spending have been borrowing money through debt, and there's only so much they can do. So that's been the big difference, right? Now going forward, it might change, right? Because populism, if it truly gets a hold, whether it's through like a Bernie Sanders or even like Trump changes tack in his next term if he's reelected, that's when you know things are really going to change, is when the money starts sort of funneling to people that actually spend money. And then you'll see more widespread inflation. If you're just giving handouts to extremely rich people, the inflation is going to show up where in what really rich people buy. And so you saw the banana duct tape to the wall that sold for $120,000.
Yeah, and I saw the guy who ate it.
Right. So that's the sort of thing that you see when money is just when certain people just have too much money. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's just money laundering. Okay, well, even if it is, right, it's still the elite economy of money laundering. Okay, and that's where you start to see these. That's where you see these things. And so my opinion is, if you look at what's really happened since, as I mentioned earlier, since this repo thing started spiking in September, and since the Fed came in with that, as well as buying short-term treasuries and expanding their balance sheet, what have you seen happen? You've seen the stock market explode higher again. It's proof to me that this money, this liquidity that's being put in the system, is once again falling into the hands of people that already have a lot of money. And what do people that already have a lot of money do? They buy stocks, they buy houses, right? Their seventh house or their eighth house. So that's what I think we need to understand. This is the oligarchy, okay, that runs this country. That is what we are. We are an oligarchy, furthering a feudalistic structure. And a feudalistic structure is what we're rapidly heading into. And I don't know if we're going to stop it, if we're going to do, look around the world, look at the French, look at the French and how they protest, and look at how, the Americans have protested this. They put on pink pussy hats, and cry about Trump. It's embarrassing, quite frankly. And so, I don't know what it's going to take, and I don't know how this gets resolved. But my feeling is that between the 2020, it could start late next year as opposed to earlier. But this period that we're entering in, 2020 to 2025, is the most important. I'm sure your listeners are familiar with the concepts of fourth turning and things like that, cyclical nature of history, is where it all plays out. And not just in the U.S. economy, but globally, geopolitically. I also think the big battle internally is going to be centralization versus decentralization, right? Power concentrated versus distributed power. And then globally, I think the same thing plays out. The unipolar empire of the United States starts to become weaker and weaker as, China and Russia and others push back to form a multipolar world. That's sort of a similar thing if you think about it. So what I want to get across is that's what I think the big fault line, whether it's on the macro level, geopolitics, or on a more micro level, the United States and countries in general, is this centralization versus decentralization. What's another example? Brexit is another example.
That's right. I just jotted that down. Boris Johnson's big victory. People are pissed off and they're starting to wake up, but what the powers that be globally want is centralization. They want bureaucrats in Brussels to rule over England and the English people. They don't want sovereignty of nations. That's why they hate Trump so much.
Right. Well, what it is, actually, I'll give you my opinion on why they hate Trump. I think I do think they hate. I think the primary reason Trump is hated so much by the establishment, because they're making money off of Trump. Don't think they're not. You know what I mean? Like the oligarchy is doing fantastically under.
Yeah, and look at the new Pentagon bill. It's over $7 billion.
Precisely. So
spending bill. Yeah.
Right. So the thing we talk about, the banker class, all right, the military industrial complex class, they're all doing great under Trump. Okay, so it's not money. What it is that Trump signaled a loss of narrative control and power. So that's what I think they're worried about. They're not so much worried about Trump, but they're worried about the precedent that Trump set. The precedent that Trump set is that we can give you Hillary, and we can tell you that you must vote for her, and we can tell you that Trump is a Nazi and the next Hitler, and you must obey. And what happened is people did not obey. And so that's what I think the true concern about Donald Trump is, and it's a legitimate one, because it was a leading indicator that credibility is just being lost across the board. And I tweeted yesterday that I think the Epstein, which I spent a lot of time digging into. I think that affair, historically speaking, right, like 10, 20, 30 years from now, when we look back at this period, that's going to be the moment where I think the majority of the American public essentially lost all credibility to Washington, D.C.
Oh, I agree. I saw a tweet after I think they said that they didn't have any of the video. The cameras were down. Now they're saying the video footage of his first suicide attempt has gone missing. I saw a tweet after he reportedly was quote unquote murdered or hung himself or whatever happened that this is the day we all become conspiracy theorists, or everyone's a conspiracy theorist now, because nothing in that story adds up and everybody knows it.
Right. Okay. So good point. And what I was saying to a friend the other day, which I think is very important, and this is why the Epstein story had to be buried so quickly, not just because it could have exposed so many of the ruling elite, the status quo class, but because it's a unifier, right? I mean, what issue unites Americans more than that story is BS? Like it's great because no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, we can agree that they murdered Epstein. Right? I mean, and so that's powerful. It's very powerful.
Yeah, or they renditioned him, because without video footage, who knows what happened to him? I mean, we can assume that they actually murdered him. I would buy that, probably true. But who really knows? I mean, and that's the problem with these types of holes in official stories, is it gets people to become conspiracy theorists, because clearly there was a conspiracy in this case to cover up what actually happened to the guy.
Yeah. I mean, right. I tend to think, my view is that he was murdered because, it's just cleaner. I mean, if he was like the most important person in the world, then maybe they would have snuck him out. But honestly,
yeah, that's right. And look at all the problems Prince Andrew is having because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein. And now that Epstein's dead, it still doesn't matter. People are so awake to this whole entire idea of child sex trafficking and pedophilia that is that his name, right? Prince
Andrew.
Yeah. Prince Andrew is not getting away clean on this thing. He's basically gone underground.
Right. So that issue, it's a good example. And I suspect that more issues like that will come up. I mean, again, right, it's not just Trump supporters who distrust the propaganda mass media. It's across the spectrum. And, I take pride in this because I really don't, I'm just one of these people that doesn't have an ideology that's popular at all, right? I mean, I'm more of a decentralist and a localist. And if you want to talk about what that means, we can. But where it's sort of like, let people live how they want to live. I don't want my point of view of how I would like to live be thrust upon everybody in the country. I think this notion that a country of 325 million people should be legislated and ruled as one is ludicrous. And of course, the founding documents was to decentralize power in the United States. That was the entire purpose of the Constitution.
Absolutely. And Jefferson said the only reason to resort to government at all is to protect our liberties. And this country has moved so far away from that since 2001 and before that it, boggles the mind. The NDAA, the John Warner Defense Authorization Act, it's just, it's become a police state of sorts. And you're absolutely right. We moved so far away from these founding documents, and the Democrats would like to move us even further away from those founding documents, although they claim to love the Constitution.
Well, so here's my view. Of course, I agree with that, but I think it's bigger than that, right? Which is why I have no home in either party. I mean, I like completely just think they're both a joke. I don't take them seriously. And the reason is this: to me, it's two mobs that are fighting to run the country. And my philosophy, right, my political philosophy is nobody should be running the country. No mob should be running the country. You know what I'm saying? Like there isn't, I don't want to do it. Trump shouldn't do it. Clinton shouldn't do it. We should be running our own communities and cities and states at the ground level. And that's essentially what localism is, right? This concept of localism or decentralization of power is this idea that communities should be choosing how to structure their lives for their citizens at a local level.
Agreed, 100%. I hate to interrupt. I want to just give an excellent example, I think, of what you're saying that can happen because people have power. Look what that criminal Virginia governor wants to do about guns. He wants to take the guns. And so counties, I think 90% of the counties in Virginia, the sheriffs have said, nope, this is now a sanctuary county for gun owners. We're not coming after your guns, and we will stand in opposition to anybody who wants to come after the guns. And I do think that's somewhat an example of what you're saying, because people collectively have power. And if we stand for our own rights, if we can stand up, maybe we can throw off these tyrants once and for all. That's my view. And it may be naive, but I think that's a good example maybe of what you're talking about.
It's a great example. And actually, it's so important that I'm probably going to write my next piece whenever that happens about that. But I want everyone to see this in a larger context. So let's say someone watching this right now is huge pro Second Amendment. And I mean, I am pro Second Amendment, but I'm just saying, let's say that's your thing and you're happy about this because you agree with it. Try not to think so narrowly, right? You should agree with this concept irrespective of the issue. So in other words, like if there's a city like Denver, for example, which is decriminalizing psilocybin, right, which is the active ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms, which happened.
Psilocybin is okay.
Yeah, psilocybin. That's right. So in other words, what happened? Basically, the authorities there, the police, are not supposed to use any funds to prosecute. It's not like it's legal at all. But what I'm saying is this was done at the city level. Now that doesn't mean that every city, right? Just let's say someone in Kentucky is completely against that. Thinks it's terrible. Okay, that's fine. And if the people in that city culturally believe, we're not for this, then that's okay, right? But let Denver do it, right? Let Oakland do it, right? In other words, that's the ethical, reasonable way that power should be exercised. And
I totally agree, but let me push back and ask your opinion on this then. What about the lunacy that's happening in places? Is it New York that is now giving driver's licenses to illegals? The sanctuary cities in California. What happens when lunatic liberals take control and they want to implement their tyrannical vision for this country and basically thumb their noses at the federal government? Because I'm not a federalist, so I mean, we can get into that whole debate either, but I'm saying, again, the only reason to resort to government is to protect our liberties. And when the Democrats and their sanctuary cities, and they're basically burning down the economy of California with their lunacy, what happens when they do exactly what you're suggesting, but they're not doing it, in any way that we would want to see it done? They're not doing it in a pro-constitution, pro-sovereignty sort of way.
Well, I'm generally fine with it. That's my point. My point is that you got to let people live and let live, and that's the way it ought to be. Now it can get complicated, right? But if there's let's say a network of cities in the country that want to allow stuff like that, or not prosecute or really look after that sort of an issue, and people can live there, then that's fine with me. I mean, again, like I'm not here to judge. If Los Angeles County wants to do things and it ends up being a disaster, I think you let Los Angeles County do things and be a disaster. Because here's the thing, if you have power truly distributed and you have, let's say even beyond the state level, let's say more at the municipal level, and you're really different municipalities are creating different paradigms under which to live, but you can move from one to the other,
right?
So if LA, right, let's say, institutes horrible policies that you and I think are terrible, we would never live under, then they're going to suffer those consequences.
I agree. But I think where I bump on that is the fact that they're lawless. They'll implement lawless policies. And then when they destroy the economy, they're going to look to the federal government to bail them out. I mean, look what's going on with the Illinois pensions. So I totally agree with you. But I think as it affects the body whole, the body politic of the nation at large, California being the fifth largest economy on the planet, it's a pretty important case study. And these liberals are destroying it. And then they're going to look to the feds to bail them out. So then that affects all of us.
Of course it does. But you have to understand that that's just one. Look, the bailing out of California, it doesn't compare to the bailing out of bankers. It doesn't compare to the bailing. Look at the military.
That's right. Yep.
Right. So what? Look, I want to make something clear. When I talk like this, I'm talking political philosophy. Right. I'm not saying, right, that we have the window now to actually do this. Okay. I just want people to start thinking. I guess the reason I brought this up was so that people understand where I'm coming from. I'm not saying like, oh, we can do this today, right? This sort of a world may not happen in my lifetime. I'm just sort of talking about where I think we should be going and thinking about political power and self-government. Because yes, of course you're right. In a world that we live in an empire. Okay, we live in an imperial oligarchy where me and you, we're talking, we have our ideas. Hopefully in the long run we can influence people, but we have no power. We have zero power, right? They don't care what we think. They do whatever they want. Look at REPO. Okay. So yes, you're right. In the context of where we're at now, we don't have the space to do it. My feeling, however, is, and this is why I was talking about the 2020, 2025 period, is that I think there's a good chance that a lot of centralized power structures that currently are dominant could collapse or become so weak that the space will exist, right, to start moving towards these sorts of solutions.
Right.
So in other words, if DC, right, if the currency is so terrible and DC is so weak that it can't bail out California, then what happens? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally do.
That's
No,
what
I totally understand. And I think, my friend Chris Duane has made the argument that when this thing burns down, maybe we can start over with honest money and with decentralization and with community. And I think a great example from my view, just sitting here looking out my back window as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking of all the property taxes I pay that I'm forced to pay or I'll lose my house, right? I never really will outright own my home because even when it's finally paid off, they're going to force me to pay property taxes. Same with all my neighbors. And as I look at all of these homes in this neighborhood, and then I think about my city, and I think about this state, the school, the public school, the high school that they built is now the biggest, most populated high school in the state in which I live. 3,000 students jammed into that thing, and they have police officers there every day to help keep the peace. It's basically a prison camp. And I think that's just a great example of the bureaucracy and the dangers of centralization, because of much smaller schools spread throughout the city where the neighborhood kids would each go to their own little school, like almost, I'm thinking of like Little House on the Prairie. I mean, let's get back to basics where community is king instead of herding kids in a giant hellhole with police officers and 3,000 students where the kids get lost and nobody gets, and they sit in classes with 40 students, 50 students to a teacher. As the bureaucrats make all the money, right? I mean, maybe I'm on a bit of a tangent, but I do see what you're saying. I think community is better, and maybe when this whole thing melts down, we'll have a chance to start over. But I worry about it. If you look at what happened in Venezuela, if you look at the Weimar Republic, if you look at Zimbabwe, if they are allowed to destroy our currency, and then UN Agenda 2030 policies, they literally are saying they want us to live as serfs in order to save the planet, from global warming. I really do worry about the future. How do we all fight back when we're broke?
Okay, so yeah, that is important. We're already broke, though, right? You see, like, I mean, that's the thing. I think the reason why so many Americans are not doing anything or not as outraged, let's say, populations abroad, is because we're sort of like the entire millennial generation is basically a bunch of debt slaves, and again, I think that's intentional, because when you pile on debt to people and they feel like they can't get out of it, they're going to be more passive, it seems. I mean, at least that's been the case here for whatever reason. And so we sort of already are there. I don't think that the reason I do what I do is because I think that the worst possible thing is if you get a breakdown, something's going to fill the vacuum, right? And I think that's what you're saying, right? You're worried that vacuum is going to be filled with an agenda of more centralization, surveillance, right? I mean, clearly, I would agree that when you look at what the oligarchs are doing in this country and in others, it's pretty clear that they think they can get away with it. So why do they think they can get away with it? I think they think they can get away with it because their plan is essentially gradually to put in the surveillance state, this police state, and then over time become more like, sort of a Chinese society,
right,
where people have almost no political freedoms at all and are largely broke. That's the outcome that you're concerned about.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I do what I do and I write and I try to talk about my political philosophy, this is why I talked about the decentralization idea and localism, is because you have to have a competing narrative. You have to have a competing vision, and you have to have that win in the minds of people in order to even have a chance to make this a better outcome going forward. So that's why I do. That's why I do what I do. Right? Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but that's the only chance we have. If we don't actually infect the minds. I mean, you mentioned the sanctuary city thing, and again, think about that. It's interesting what's going on, because that one issue is pushing various counties to independently get upset, okay, on a similar issue. And that's the sort of thing that can happen when people are thinking. It's the sort of thing that can happen at the grassroots level when people are pushed too far. So here's the thing, Sean. We're going to get pushed. okay, we're going to get pushed in a lot of ways. It's not just going to be guns. It's not just going to be, it's going to be civil liberties in general. It's going to be economic. It's going to be financial system. I mean, look at how they're pushing with what, like I said, with this repo right in your face. Okay. So that's what's going to happen over the next few years. You're going to get pushed and you're going to get pushed and you're going to get pushed, keep getting pushed until some sort of response happens. And my opinion is the best kind of response that we can offer is at a grassroots level. Think about it from that perspective, okay? And then you can join in with other cities or counties around you around a similar issue. And that's powerful, right? Right now, the American public, right? I like the American public has been domesticated, okay? We're a domesticated animal. So how do we become undomesticated? It's not by screaming to your representative in DC, hoping they're going to do something decent. I mean, if you think that's going to happen, I think you're in for a bad rude awakening. The way you do it is to start at the local level, okay? And hopefully you can build some sort of consensus to push back. Another example that's not Second Amendment related is facial recognition. So I don't know if you've been following this. Similar things are going on where ordinances are being passed in Massachusetts, in California, to ban facial recognition from the state, from the government, from the police. And so that's another example of an issue that you can push it at a local level and have it spread like wildfire. If we don't do that, okay, if we don't do that on issues that are crucial to civil liberties, for example, we are finished. We are finished. Do not expect Washington, D.C. to ever do anything decent, because they won't. We have to start at the local level. Again, I go back to, let's say, recreational drugs. Colorado, where I live, cannabis was legalized here. Now it's all over the country. Did Washington, D.C. do anything? Nothing. They still haven't changed the Schedule 1 categorization of it. So again, if you want things done, do it at the local level. Create consensus at the local level. Start grassroots. Grassroots is powerful. You can go have a beer with your neighbor and talk about what you're going to do. DC is worthless, completely worse than worthless. It's a mafia. Okay, forget about them.
Yeah, I do agree. A mafia is a good way to put it. All right. Well, as we wrap up this conversation, I want to give you kudos on something you said, and let me do a screen share here because I think you nailed it in regards to repo and inflation. So we'll go back here and do a screen share. The stock market has become a private club for the elite. So where we're seeing all the inflation is in the things the elite buy. So luxury car prices are going up. I'm talking about the collectible cars. Art prices are going through the roof. We saw the Rolex Daytona, once owned by Paul Newman, go for $17 million at an auction. So many examples. You mentioned the banana taped to the wall, selling for some, I think, $150,000. Absolutely absurd. And what popped into my head, and I wanted to share this with you because I think the elite, in this case, this artist, 58-year-old Maurizio Catalan, who is the brains behind that piece of art. Did you see this? The gold toilet titled America is the same artist who taped the banana to the wall and got $150,000 for it. And by the way, that was such a preposterous piece of art that somebody, a man, a white middle-aged man, stood in front of it, took the banana off the wall and ate it, and then was arrested for having eaten the quote-unquote art. We have reached total madness. Gold toilets, by the way, this gold toilet has been stolen. I think it's since been recovered, but a solid gold toilet titled America. One wonders what they're trying to tell us, Mike.
Yeah, so I'm glad you ended with that because it really is the important thing. I want people to take a step back and get out of the weeds with the repo and understand what it is. Again, this is being used as an excuse, whether there's a real problem or not. We're not told, don't forget, we don't know who's getting the loans. So we don't even know. Like, what if it's hedge funds? What if it's hedge funds with bad trades that need short-term funding to continue to make tons of money? This is just proof that we do not have any say. There's no self-government. It's a joke. The central banks do whatever they want without telling you anything. And you see the results. The results are the money ends up into the hands of people that already have all the money, and then they're spending that money or liquidity, however you want to define it, in stuff that they like to buy: stocks, bonds, real estate, gold toilets, bananas taped to a wall. this is what's going on. This is absolute theft. That is what this is.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for coming back on. I hope you'll come on again prior to another 7 years having passed. Let's get you on again next time you have something to say, or you write a new article, or any reason you want to come on at all. And I'll remind people that your website, a very good must-see website on a daily basis, is libertyblitzkrieg.com. And why don't you shout out any other avenues people can reach you? I know Twitter. You're big on Twitter.
Yeah, a few things. Thanks, Sean. I actually do most of my content stuff on Twitter now. Thanks for mentioning that. It's at Liberty Blitz. So if you want to, hear what I'm thinking on a daily basis on a variety of topics, you got to, follow me on Twitter. That's where I'm putting most of my effort now, because I'm getting a lot of feedback and interaction there. The website I save for really a post once a week, a thought piece, something that's really on my mind that I think is important that I want to share. So they're very different. But if you want my, daily thoughts, go to Twitter. The other thing is, if you like this and if you like my work in general, there are tons of ways you can support me. You can go to my support page on my website. I got rid of ads completely last February because I wanted to get away from Google again. And in general, I feel like I want my work to be user reader supported. So if you like what I do, I'm not getting any money at all from advertisers or anything like that. So if you want to support what I'm doing, you can donate through a variety of ways on support my site. But either way, I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate your voice. I always have. So again, thank you for coming on and helping us understand things from your vantage point, because I think that's what really important. We need to all talk with each other and start to work these issues out, because as you pointed out by retweeting that poll, even people that follow this stuff in the financial markets are confused by it. And that's what happens when unelected bankers get to rule the world, right? Nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not going to be right about everything. You're not going to agree with me on everything. Nobody that's watching this is going to agree with me on everything. Let's just talk, as you say. Let's talk as humans. Okay, I don't have power in this country. Sean, you don't have political, economic power in this country. Okay, we're not making the decisions. So let's not fight amongst each other about these things. Okay, we really need to see the big picture. There's a small group of people that are looting this country completely. And let's talk to each other. And where we disagree, we disagree. And where we agree, let's work together. That's my message.
Yeah. Amen. All right, guys. Well, our guest has been Mike Krieger, the website libertyblitzkrieg.com. And of course, on Twitter, it's at Liberty Blitz. Mike, thanks so much.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this information, please give it a like and then spread it within your sphere of influence on social media, etc. Share it with your friends, neighbors, and colleagues. I bet a lot of the people you live next to don't understand, have never heard of repo, don't know anything about these issues. They don't even know central banks are privately owned, like our own, the Federal Reserve. Guys, thanks so much for all you do. A special thanks to my patrons for keeping us in the fight for truth and real news, even while YouTube tries to shut us up and shadow ban us and prevent our information from being spread and recommended. And for real news 24/7, you can visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless. Bye-bye.
I don't call them the mainstream media anymore. I call them state-controlled media. They are no different. The only difference between them and TASS and Pravda in the old Soviet Union is that the Soviet citizens were astute enough, unlike most Americans, to realize they were being lied to and that this was state-controlled media. That's the only difference.